Welcome to Make the Grade with the Success Doctor, Stephen Green, where you'll discover actionable strategies to help your student to reach their academic goals, to excel at standardized testing, and to plan for the college admissions process painlessly. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Green.
Hey everybody, Steve Green here. My guest, Dalia Kinsey, is in the studio with me today. Hello, Dalia. How are you?
Great. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, this is going to be really good. We are going to talk about a really important topic, I think, not just in the education world, I think just in the world, period, which is nutrition. Nutrition. Dalia is a school nutritionist, a dietitian, and has a podcast, a brethren podcast. Hers is called the School Nutrition Dietitian. Try saying that 10 times fast while you're eating a peanut butter and tofu cracker. But anyway, seriously, I think nutrition is, with all the stuff going on in the education world, testing and standard testing. I mean, there's 100 things you can discuss, but one of the things that's a really common baseline is, are our children getting fed properly? A lot of kids, unfortunately, are reliant on school lunches, sometimes school breakfasts. So they're being fed by the school. I don't think, I can't cite it, maybe Dalia can, but there's tons of evidence, having a good breakfast, enabling learning much better for the kids during the day. And on top of that, having tried a high quality food as opposed to, breakfast that's really sugary and so on and so on. So why don't we start it this way? Let me give like a little background of where I'm coming from, and I'll let you tell where you're coming from. I'll just get into some topical stuff here. So my business is called Make the Grade. I am a academic support and tutoring company based in the Philadelphia area. We help families of children, basically school age, elementary, middle, high school, and college to a degree, navigate the murky waters of academics. How about that? But my main thing on the podcast is to try to give families actions that they can take right away. You literally pause in the middle of a podcast and go do something. So whether it's tutoring related, whether it's time related, or it's information related, whether it's a better way to study, that's where I'm coming from. So I think the link here to me is we have to nourish ourselves well. We have to, and this is a long term. This is not something you do one day and then you're fine for a year.
Exactly.
Some of the academic stuff can be a little bit of a quick fix that way. So I'm excited. I think we're going to learn a lot today, and we're going to get some really good takeaways. Dalia, tell me about yourself.
So like you said, I have my own podcast. The focus of my podcast is sometimes for professional development, topics that people who actually work in school nutrition would be interested in. But also I do some parent-focused episodes to try and encourage more communication between the parents and the operators and the students and the programs, because our customer is the student. So your child is our client. And so we want to make sure their nutritional needs are satisfied, but we also want to make sure we're serving them things they actually want to eat, because it doesn't matter if something's really good for you. If you don't eat it, it won't serve you. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand. You would think that if someone's really hungry, they would eat whatever you put in front of them. But parents know that children are strong-willed. And if they don't want something, some kids would rather just go hungry than have something that doesn't appeal to them. So we really value our kids' opinions, and we value communicating with our parents. Like you mentioned, quality nutrition is a foundation when it comes to being in a good place to be able to learn. And instead of looking at stats, I usually just tell people to think about the last time they were ravenous. Maybe you were too busy to eat and the day just got away from you. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden your mood crashed. You couldn't think clearly. You couldn't concentrate. Your brain really needs carbs, easily accessible carbs, to function. And the first thing to go when you don't eat well is your mental clarity. It's almost impossible to learn and to behave when you're hungry. And you really see that. You can see it in yourself when people say like, oh, you're being a little crabby. And you're like, yeah, it's really time for me.
A nice way to put it. Well, I don't remember. I remember from biochemistry, I think it's like 40% of your energy you eat in a day is used by your brain, which seems disproportionate because you got so many muscles. But that's the effect. And let me just point this out. Dalia isn't just talking the talk. She walks the walk, 'cause this is your day job, right?
Yes, exactly.
You're not just a book expert, so to speak. You are in schools. You are actually in the front line making menus and
Right.
doing the acquisition of the food and things like this. What would you let's start out this way. Would you say, is there one singular kind of challenge that you see? Let's talk about, say, balancing the whole idea of, for a parent, working at home, schoolwork, work, trying to prepare meals, trying to manage kids' schedules. It's challenging, right?
Yes.
It's challenging anyway. Like,
Right.
you got the typical people go off to work, they come home, they're stressed out. Now they got to cook a meal. The kids are screaming and yelling like that. But what, if we kind of think of this as almost like a reset point, what's the advice you would give parents?
To try and make things as easy on yourself as possible right now, because
Okay.
these are stressful times and you're being asked to do more than probably ever before, all at the same time in like very inconvenient ways. You don't have access to childcare. Maybe you usually have someone come in and help with the house. If you have access to things like that, you don't have access to that right now. So you really want to be looking for shortcuts and not focusing on perfection. Remember that the human body is very resilient and children are very resilient. Not every meal has to be perfect for people to be perfectly nourished. Your body can combine nutrients from a previous meal. You're just looking for balance over the course of the week, really. You're not looking to be perfect at every sitting. If your kids are big enough to feed themselves sometimes, you may want to put things out that they can access. So if you go on Amazon, which we can still order from Amazon right now, they're child
Mm-hmm.
safe knives. If your kid is even 4 years old, I would say, you can let them help when you get your grocery orders in, cut up their little strawberries or their fruit or whatever it is they think they would like for a snack, and put it in little containers that you're comfortable with the serving size. Put them in the fridge where it's at a level where they can open it and they can go in and they can get it, and let them know this part of the fridge is for you. When you're hungry, you can go over there. You don't have to keep interrupting my conference calls because you have the munchies. You can open the fridge on your own. I would
Mm-hmm.
say put a lot of the responsibility, not a lot, put some back on the child, give them some freedom. They're bored too. They're sick of being inside too. Give them something to do. So try and put the fun back in eating. A lot of kids enjoy having some autonomy. So if you can let them participate in the food prep process, that may help out a lot.
I guess you could also batch tasks. Like, you could cut up 5 apples or whatever at a certain time, and then just, so you don't, every time you want something, have to prep
Exactly.
it. Um,
And
is
just
there?
think with
Go
that one,
ahead.
I wanted to say, just think about the individual fruit or whatever that you're cutting up. If it's one that's likely to brown after you've cut it, you can put some drops of lemon juice or something on it to try and stop it from getting some brown.
That's a real pro tip there.
I'll eat a brown apple, but
Yeah,
a 5-year-old will not.
that is true. In terms of timing, there's sort of the classic 3 square meals a day sort of thing. I don't know where that is in the dietary recommendations anymore, but it when we're trying to schedule a day academically, like let's say right now you got a couple kids at home, you're trying to work as a parent, you're trying to help get your kids functionally able to educate, whether it's independently or hand holding them. Is it important to schedule when you're going to have meals? Like, maybe at 8 o'clock we all have breakfast, and you do school from 9 to 10 while I do some work. What's your take on that?
I think biologically you don't really need that, but I think as far as organizing your day and having some sense of normalcy and structure to the day, it may be helpful for your kids, because during the day at school, they're used to being on a schedule.
Yes.
I would just want to try and tailor it to when they typically seem to be getting hungry anyway. So you don't want to feed them way before they're actually hungry, which is something that happens a lot when it comes to school, because you get up in the morning, you're probably not immediately hungry unless you're going through some kind of a growth spurt. Most people would want food, like you said, maybe around 8, but some kids are having to eat at like 6:30. Who's hungry at 6:30? So I would try and give them the option to continue to graze, because children are growing and their body is the greatest authority on when and how much they should be eating. It's helpful, I think, to let them have some freedom as far as snacking goes. But for the sit down meals, you may want to space those out so they work with your schedule.
So basically just trust nature. But here's the problem. I can hear what parents are saying at home. What if my 6-year-old wants to eat at 7 o'clock, and my 9-year-old wants to eat at 11, and my 13-year-old wants to eat all day, and my teenager, will only eat when they wake up at 3 in the afternoon.
That is exactly how they will be, right? Everybody will be all over the place.
Right,
so.
I get that. Well, I think the word that you said, which I'm going to agree with completely, is structure, right? And academically, that's the same thing, because that's what I'm getting a lot. How do I make my day work with all these balls we're juggling in the air? And my shortest answer I give you is structure. You have to have an academic structure. You have to have a physical structure. Where's homework? One of the advice I've been giving parents lately is create like a schoolroom in your house. Like make a part of your room or whatever. When you're sitting here, you're doing school. And I think you have to wrap the nutrition around that a little bit. But let's talk about quality of food, okay? Because you can give a kid a Twinkie, which I guess is the stereotypical junk food, maybe, right?
Yeah, they recently started producing those again, right?
I
think
mean, when I was growing up, that was like the ultimate, basically empty calorie, carcinogenic thing you could eat. But and no disrespect to Twinkie lovers out there, but let's assume as a parent, your goal is a nutritious, healthy, vitamin-rich meal. How do we handle that when we have limited access to go shopping, right? I mean, you're taking your life in your hands, almost literally. Sometimes going to the store, even when you get there, the stock of things may not be what you're looking for. But as a nutritionist and as a dietitian, and what's your recommendations here?
Don't be afraid to use frozen and canned vegetables. So if you are trying to limit your sodium because you as an adult, maybe you have a health condition that requires that, you can still buy canned vegetables that are sodium free or low sodium, or if the only thing you can find right now has the regular amount of sodium in it, you can rinse it before you eat it. So
get all that extra stuff out.
Exactly. And then also, typically what I buy canned is beans, but if you're cooking beans from dry, you don't have to add any salt, and it doesn't require you standing there and really watching it if you have it in a crock pot. Of course, if you don't already have a crock pot at home, you're probably not going to be able to get one right now. So if not, just don't worry about that. I would say the frozen vegetables, a lot of people think of all packaged food as bad for you, but the truth of the matter is frozen vegetables were picked at the peak of freshness and immediately flash frozen and preserved. So they're actually very fresh and nutritious. It is true, depending on how you preserve foods and how you prepare foods, some nutrients are more available or less available. Like if you have a raw tomato, you may get things out of it that you won't get out of a cooked tomato. But you just want to go for variety. And right now, if you can't get a fresh tomato, that's fine. Your body doesn't have to have it. We will not be living under these circumstances forever. And especially,
let's hope not.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I'm already freaking out at the possibility of it being like January 1 before the kids are back. I just said, oh my goodness, please don't let that be.
Well, that's unfortunately possible. But
yeah.
So do you recommend a family, let's say, planning out their meals? So maybe you get together as a family on a Saturday or whatever, and you say, hey guys, we need to plan out 7 dinners, 7 lunches. We're going to go to a big bulk shop, get the input. I guess the parents ultimately have the sort of veto power if the kids' choices aren't what they want. But to bring this all together, our goal is to raise healthy kids, right?
Right.
and we're assuming the diet is a big component of that. How much have you seen, and this is a little bit off script, but I think it's an interesting question to ask. If you're able as a parent to establish good eating habits in a young child, today, is there any science or any research that carries through later? Because I've heard every side of it. I've had kids tell me, my parents were vegetarians and they never let me eat anything. And I went to college and I became like a sugar addict, or because they were unable, they didn't eat ice cream every day because they weren't allowed to have it growing up.
There is a lot of research to support that depending on how you guide your young eater, it could basically lay a foundation for how they relate to food for the rest of their lives. If you're too restrictive, sometimes there's that rebound. So like the kids who say, oh, they made me, I
only ate salad for 14 years and now they're.
Yes. And then they just got to go off the rails. So you have to strike a balance. It's your job as a parent to determine what they can eat, but the body should decide how much and when. So you determine what comes into the house, but you don't need to tell your child when and how much. Now, for structure, yeah, to some extent, it may not be practical to just tell them, do whatever you want. But really, a young body doesn't need outside interference when it comes to how much food is enough food, and
they'll self-regulate.
They will self-regulate, but you have to give them the freedom to do that. And then depending on the child, if they've never had that opportunity to self-regulate, it may take them a little while to find a balance. So still, even if you're young, your brain will play a lot of tricks on you when you think there's scarcity. So if you think I can only have candy corn at Halloween, when Halloween comes around, you eat candy corn until you vomit. Now, if you were allowed to have candy corn all year, you would never eat to that point, So if you have been restricting, there might be a little window there where they don't quite nail it.
I mean, I think there's a point of reasonability where everything in moderation is sort of a motto sort of idea. Let's shift a little bit into behavior, because I know when I was teaching, it was always, nobody wanted to have the class right after lunch, right? Because the kids would go to lunch, they get all, they'd be tired, they go to lunch, they'd get all sugared up, and then the class after lunch, they were just, like bees in a jar. What's the relationship as you see it between diet, behavior, ability to learn? Because that's really an important question, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's an individual level here somewhere where everybody's going to react somewhat differently to different foods. But is there an optimal diet for academic optimization? Is there a kind of just a good one?
I think
is it just common sense? I mean, tell us what your feelings are here.
At this point, I would argue that common sense may not even be a thing anymore, because we've all heard so many different conflicting messages.
Well, with diet, yeah.
Right. But I would say that the USDA, they put in a lot of work and a lot of research when it comes to what their recommendations for Americans are. And even people who pride themselves on eating super, super clean and they're not impressed with what the USDA recommends, if you really read through the full document of the dietary guidelines for Americans, you'll see that they're really on point with the research. Maybe they don't try and get the whole country to make massive changes at once. They're just trying to get people to make little steps in the right direction. But if you go and look at myplate.gov, back in the day when I was a kid, we were using the pyramid, but now it's a plate. It's supposed to be an easy visual for parents and kids, everybody, to see what does a healthy plate look like. It is more vegetables than anything else. So that kind of is common sense, because we've all been told to eat our vegetables. Whether or not we're doing it is another thing. Then the fruit is there, but not in the same quantity as the vegetables. Okay. Protein is not the star of the plate, and then there are whole grains there. All of those things help keep your blood sugar stable. I would say stable blood sugar is like the key to being able to behave and being able to study. When you have spikes, that's where you see changes in behavior. So maybe yeah, exactly. That's perfect. You captured it. It's because like a roller coaster.
What I'm focused on is being able to learn.
Right.
Right. But you can't learn if you're not behaving. or listening, able to listen and sit still. Uh, so lots of vegetables, a little bit less fruit, decent amount of protein, grains. How do you think schools are doing? I know you're in that business. Are we doing a good job? I know it's not easy. I know there's economic pressures. I know there's probably political pressures somewhere along the way because there isn't everything. You got the government involved. But generally speaking, how would you how would you grade?
I think considering
Give it
how
a
many
grade.
cooks are in the kitchen, I'm gonna give us a low B, I
Okay,
guess. And
not
it
bad.
depending on where you are,
How do we get
some
to
of
an A? How do we get to an A?
I think we need to focus less on restriction and more on guiding the children toward having a regular relationship with all food. Like
Okay.
not demon. This is my opinion. Like
Okay.
I don't think it's helpful to tell kids like, oh, have a Twinkie and that's it. It's trash, it's poison. I think that's a little dramatic and it kind of creates this good food, bad food perspective. It's a false dichotomy. Everything can fit, like you said, in moderation,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't be moderate if some things are prohibited and some things are not. People crave what they can't have. And you'll see it with anybody. I mean, they've done, even on a small scale, that test where they try and see how high a kid's ability to self regulate is. Like they'll leave them alone with some marshmallows and tell them, if you don't eat this marshmallow, I'll give you 20 marshmallows later. And
Right.
then they leave
Yeah.
them alone with it. Like if you restrict something, all of a sudden it becomes very appealing. But if you just let it be and you don't, green light some things and restrict others, it's easier to be moderate. But the way we relate to food in this country is heavily influenced by diet culture, which is not about health, it's about weight management.
Yeah,
But kids
right.
shouldn't be worried about weight management.
No,
We're
not when
trying to
you're
teach,
7 or 8.
exactly. We just want to teach them how to eat a balanced diet over the life cycle, and nothing needs to be restricted. We need to teach them delicious ways to eat vegetables and delicious ways to be involved in food prep. So I think we need more of a focus on the practical skills of cooking and enjoying. If all you've ever been served is a boiled broccoli, there's a boiled broccoli floret. There's a reason why you don't want to eat broccoli, and
Right.
you haven't had it in its ideal form. I really think we need to focus on flavor and making things delicious, and not bringing in that diety talk.
Well, clearly, it's not just about the food when you're talking about institutional situation, right? Because you've got time constraints. You may not, if you can just throw something in for 4 minutes of prep versus an hour, sometimes that just is how it's going to be. You've got volume. I mean, how many children are in the schools that you serve? Probably
We
several hundred, right?
usually, right,
How
well,
many meals are you making a day?
it's usually about 18,000,
Okay, I
but
mean that's a lot. That's a lot
over
of food, right?
38 different schools. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And some of the challenges that we face now is like the people that are in the workforce weren't raised by people who had the time to cook at home. So the people who fed me when I was in public school, they knew how to do everything from scratch. People who now are in their 60s and 70s, they
Because they
had
grew up with
they
that.
grew up with it. And
Yes.
now we're getting people who have never cooked anything. Maybe they prepared some things in the microwave. And so if we ask them like to
How
even
can you,
fold in an ingredient,
julienne a carrot or
yeah, they're like,
whatever?
what are you talking about? So,
And
so
listen, it's not like we expect to have gone to culinary school to work in a school cafeteria, but
home cooks used to know that though.
yeah, well, yeah. Because I grew up in a household where we didn't never ever ate out. My
Right.
parents just, I don't know if they were cheap. They weren't cheap, but I think they just prefer. My mother was an excellent cook, and they just liked it better.
Were both of your
Um,
parents working when you were a kid?
yeah, well, my mom was a teacher. My dad
Okay.
was in the education as well. But yeah, but they made it a priority, and that just was part of my uh, growing up experience. But I let me ask you one more question here: is if there's one thing you could change, we got this is the magic wand. I ask a lot of my people that we converse with here. If there's one thing you could change, bang, starting tomorrow or starting for the better So something you would just get rid of, something you would add, and this is we know there's challenges here, but I think you're doing the best you can. But what's the one thing maybe you could just bang and you know?
I wish that the educational system wasn't so, I don't want to say fractured, but everyone has their own objectives and we operate as separate little teams. I wish it was more holistic because there's a lot of educational work that we could be doing as a nutrition department with other teachers, and the kids would leave us better off for it. So if the math department would take advantage of all the math lessons we could teach from a culinary perspective.
Counting calories or
right,
grams of fat or whatever.
Yeah, even in baking, baking is so temperamental. It's all about chemical reactions, and you can't just eyeball measurements. You really have to understand measurements and fractions. And we also have a lot of gardens in a lot of our schools too, and there's a ton of different lessons to be learned in a garden. But for the most part, all of these programs operate completely separate from the rest of the school system. And if there was more integration, I feel like we would cover a lot of bases with our students, and it would even change the way they eat.
Interesting. Steve Green here, the Success Doctor, the Make the Grade podcast, talking with Dalia Kinsey, school nutritionist and dietitian, and the School Nutrition Dietitian podcast. And we are having a riveting discussion. I think this is really interesting because it's so global. I mean, this just affects everyone. It's like school affects almost everyone, and this affects almost everyone in school. Here's the good news, audience. We're going to do this again, Dalia and I. We've got so much to cover. We're going to try to break this up into a couple episodes upcoming. And you can tell me if I'm wrong here, Dalia. Is there such a thing as brain food? I like that topic. We're going to save that. What educational lessons can we learn from food prep? We touched on that tiny bit. Positive side effects, bring your child into food prep, making it a family affair. Food's effect on behavior. We're going to talk about this in the next episode. Let's kind of summarize here. So if I'm a parent, well, I am a parent, but if I'm a parent with kids in school, what is there anything I can do personally? Like if I'm packing lunch, my kid isn't buying lunch at school, isn't provided lunch at school. We got the myplate.gov, right? We got hopefully the kid's a willing participant in the so-called healthy diet. What's your message to parents? I mean, is there any direct interaction? Are you like how do I want to say this? In your role, how much interaction do you have with parents in the districts you got a lot of schools.
I almost only see parents for the kids on special diets. So if a kid with a new diabetes diagnosis or renal failure or allergies, I do see those parents all the time.
Okay, so let's say here's your plan. I'm going to give you the platform here. Every parent in your school districts is listening. Hopefully they are. What's your message to them? What are you telling them about what your goal is, and what you would need them or like them to do to help you reach that goal?
Eating a balanced diet can be healthy and fun. Eating should be delicious and enjoyable. Let's bring the joy back into the kitchen.
I like that. That could be a t-shirt. I like that. So basically, if I can summarize, you want to develop a positive association with food for kids, because that is going to have a lifetime effect. You don't want, somebody getting anorexia later because they're too worried about their body image. And I had a psychologist talk about that with a boy, maybe even 6 months ago. I forget when we talked, but because there's so much social pressure, which isn't really the purpose of our discussion, but food is a part of that sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the last word here. Anything specific you want to say in closing, and then we'll wrap this up and we will move on to episode 2.
Parents should really try and be easy on themselves right now. You can create structure, include your kids when you're planning, like Dr. Green was explaining. It should be a family affair. But again, you were the one who's actually trying to juggle the job and the childcare and the teaching. So we need to prioritize your stress levels right now. And don't worry, the human body is very resilient. You're not going to break your child because they didn't have a fresh fruit for several months.
There we go. All right. Steve Green from the Make the Grade podcast, Dalia Kinsey, the school nutrition dietitian. This is all about giving you ideas and things you can take action on. Go make an apple and peanut butter. Celery and peanut butter. That was one of my favorite things growing up. What's your favorite? You got a favorite snack? Favorite healthy snack?
I really do love peanut butter. I will put it on anything. So yeah, I'd probably do the apple and peanut.
I had somebody, went to buy the store near us, you actually grind it. Like they have the nuts in this thing and you push a button and it kind of comes out like ice cream almost, but it's peanut butter. They put in one with almond butter. So I was there one day and this woman's just telling me how much greater almond butter, so much healthier for you. But it also costs 4 times as much. She didn't tell me that until I got to the checkout, but that was okay. So I made this sort of transition. It has more flavor, almond butter. I put it in celery. It's delicious.
That sounds like something kids would love to play with.
Yeah,
something they could go and
you got to trick them. You got to tell them it's Tootsie Roll or something. All right, we are going to wrap this up. Dalia, thank you very much, guys out there and listeners out there. I really believe, and I thank all my subscribers and listeners for sharing the podcast and coming back and commenting on the community, on the social media, by email. Oh yeah, Dalia, do you want to give out any contact information?
Yes. Good call. I realize that I keep telling people to follow me on social media on my podcast, and I almost never say where.
Do it.
It's School Nutrition RD on Instagram and on Facebook.
School Nutrition RD. Okay, beautiful. I am at Make the Grade or makethegrade.net. You can figure out the rest, especially if you've eaten a good breakfast. All right. We will talk to you next time. Thank you very much, everyone.
You've been listening to Make the Grade with the Success Doctor, Stephen Green. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. For more resources and support, please visit makethegrade.net.